Mickey Rourke was magnetic in a way that felt dangerous. When you watched him on screen in the 80s, there was something unpolished and raw about his presence. Something that suggested he might actually do the things his characters were doing. That the line between performance and reality was thinner with him than it was with other actors. He moved like someone who had lived through something difficult and carried it with him everywhere he went. And you could see it in his eyes, in the way he held his body, in the pauses between his words where something darker seemed to be happening underneath the surface. Hollywood noticed that intensity immediately and decided he was the next Marlon Brando, the next generation's most authentic talent, someone who would redefine what serious acting looked like. And for a while, it seemed like they were right. But what happened after that? How quickly everything fell apart, and how brutally the industry turned on him. That is a story about self-destruction and an unforgiving business that punishes anyone who refuses to play by its rules. Today, we are looking at what really happened to Mickey Rourke, how a troubled childhood and violence shaped everything about who he became, why boxing was more than just a hobby for him, how his discomfort with fame made him sabotage his own success, why he walked away from acting at the exact moment when he should have stayed, what his return to professional boxing cost him physically and financially, how plastic surgery and injuries transformed his appearance in ways that shocked people, why Hollywood shut the door on him even when he was still talented, how the wrestler gave him a second chance that somehow did not last, and why his story feels more tragic than cautionary. A warning about what happens when trauma meets an industry that only wants compliance. Let's fade to black. Mickey Rourke was born Philip Andre Rourke Jr. in 1952 in Schenectady, New York. His childhood was not stable or safe. His father left when he was young, and his mother remarried a man who was reportedly abusive, creating a household that was violent and unpredictable. Young Rourke learned early that the world was a dangerous place where you had to protect yourself, because nobody else would do it for you. That fundamental understanding, that belief that vulnerability meant pain and that trust could be weaponized against you, shaped everything about who he became as a person and as an actor, creating patterns of behavior that would follow him for the rest of his life. When he was around 12, the family moved to Miami, and that is where Rourke discovered boxing. Boxing became his identity, his escape, the thing that gave him structure and purpose when everything else felt chaotic and overwhelming. It was not a casual interest or something he did after school to kill time. He was good at it too, winning amateur championships and training seriously with the intention of going professional. He spent hours in the gym learning how to take a punch and how to deliver one, how to read an opponent's body language, and how to turn aggression into something controlled and effective. Boxing taught him discipline and how to channel rage productively, but it also taught him that pain was something you endured without complaining, that getting hurt was part of the process, and that vulnerability was a weakness your opponent would exploit the moment they recognized it. Those lessons would stay with him forever, becoming the foundation for how he approached everything, including his acting career. Acting came later, almost accidentally. It was not a childhood dream, but something he stumbled into when someone suggested he had the intensity for it. He studied with Sanford Meisner in New York, learning a raw, emotional approach to performance that emphasized truth over technique. Meisner wanted actors to react honestly in the moment, rather than perform planned emotions based on what they thought a scene required. Meisner's philosophy matched perfectly with who Rourke already was, someone who did not know how to fake things even when faking would have made life easier. He did not have to pretend or manufacture emotions. He just had to be himself, and himself was intense enough to fill any room he walked into, to dominate any scene he appeared in. His early film roles were small supporting parts in movies nobody remembers now. In 1979, he appeared in a low-budget thriller that came and went without anyone noticing. He did television work, guest spots on series that needed someone dangerous looking for an episode. But in 1981, everything changed with Body Heat. Lawrence Kasdan's erotic thriller starred William Hurt and Kathleen Turner in a neo-noir story about adultery and murder. Rourke played a supporting character, an arsonist who helps with the murder plot. His screen time was limited, maybe 10 minutes total, but his presence was undeniable in every second he appeared. He brought a sleazy, dangerous energy to each scene, making you believe this was someone who had actually burned buildings down for money, someone who existed in the shadows of society where normal rules did not apply. People noticed. Suddenly, Hollywood was paying attention to this intense young actor who seemed like he might explode at any moment. Then came Diner in 1982, Barry Levinson's ensemble piece about friends navigating early adulthood in 1950s Baltimore. Rourke played Boogie, a charming womanizer with gambling debts and no clear future, someone who used humor and confidence to hide that his life was falling apart. The film was a critical success, a discovery critics loved and audiences found later, and Rourke held his own alongside Kevin Bacon, Steve Guttenberg, Daniel Stern, and Ellen Barkin. He was compared to Brando and De Niro, and to the great method actors who had come before him, performers who disappeared into their roles so completely that you forgot you were watching someone acting. There was truth to those comparisons. Rourke had that same unpredictable quality, that sense that anything could happen when he was on screen, that the character might do something shocking simply because the moment required it. By the mid-1980s, Mickey Rourke was one of the most talked about actors in Hollywood, the kind of name that made scripts more interesting just by being attached to them. In 1983, he appeared in two very different films that both showcased his range and his willingness to take risks. Rumble Fish reunited him with Francis Ford Coppola, who directed this stylized black and white drama about teenage gangs that was more art film than commercial entertainment. Rourke played the motorcycle boy, an almost mythical figure his younger brother idolized, someone who had already lived through everything and come out the other side changed in ways that made normal life impossible. It was strange and beautiful and completely uncommercial, the kind of film that plays at festivals and builds cult followings over decades, but it added to Rourke's reputation as a serious artist willing to take risks that other actors avoided. The Pope of Greenwich Village paired him with Eric Roberts in a crime drama about two small-time criminals in New York's Little Italy, cousins who get involved in a robbery that goes wrong and pulls them deeper into a world they cannot control. Rourke was electric in it, funny and dangerous at the same time, playing a character who was charming and likable right up until the moment he was not, when something harder and more desperate showed through the performance. Critics praised both films, and especially praised Rourke, who seemed capable of doing anything, of inhabiting any character as long as the character had some darkness underneath the surface. And then in 1984 came Year of the Dragon, where he played a racist cop investigating Chinese organized crime in New York. The film was controversial for its depiction of Asian Americans and for its protagonist's unfiltered bigotry, but Rourke's performance was undeniable, showing a man consumed by obsession and prejudice who believed he was doing the right thing even as he destroyed everything around him. He was becoming the go-to actor for complicated, morally ambiguous characters that required real emotional depth and the courage to play unlikable people without softening their edges. But the film that made him a global star was 9.5 Weeks in 1986. Directed by Adrian Lyne, it was an erotic drama about a destructive sexual relationship between Rourke's character and Kim Basinger, exploring power dynamics and obsession through explicit scenes that pushed boundaries for mainstream cinema. The film was controversial for its content, banned in some countries and initially rated X before being cut down, but it turned Rourke into a sex symbol overnight. Suddenly, he was not just a talented actor that critics admired. He was Hollywood's most dangerous heartthrob, the bad boy that everyone wanted and nobody could control, appearing on magazine covers and being interviewed about his love life instead of his craft. Women found him irresistible. Men wanted to be him. And Rourke, who had never been comfortable with attention in the first place, suddenly had more of it than he knew how to handle or wanted to deal with. Angel Heart in 1987 let him work with Robert De Niro in a supernatural noir thriller that was dark, violent, and genuinely disturbing. He played Harry Angel, a private detective investigating a missing person case that slowly spirals into something nightmarish involving voodoo, murder, and a deal with the devil that Harry does not remember making. The film was initially rated X before being cut to an R rating, and Rourke's performance was raw and committed, showing a man's complete psychological unraveling as reality became increasingly unstable. He was at his peak commercially and artistically, getting the kinds of roles that should have made him one of the biggest stars of his generation, someone who could carry films and choose whatever projects interested him. But here's what people don't always understand about Mickey Rourke. He hated being famous. He despised the celebrity culture that came with success, the interviews where reporters asked about his personal life instead of his work, the photo shoots where he was expected to look a certain way and project a specific image, the public appearances where he had to perform a version of himself that didn't actually exist. He resented being treated like a product, like something manufactured and packaged for consumption rather than a human being with thoughts and feelings and the right to privacy. And the more successful he became, the more he pushed back against it, showing up to interviews hostile and uncooperative, refusing to play the game that other actors accepted as part of the job. Stories started circulating about Rourke being difficult on set. He clashed with directors over character interpretations and dialogue. He rewrote his lines without permission because he thought he understood his character better than the writers did. He showed up late or didn't show up at all, forcing productions to shoot around him or wait until he decided to appear. Some of this was legitimate artistic disagreement, cases where Rourke genuinely believed he understood something about the character that the director was missing, and sometimes he was probably right about those instincts. But some of it was self-sabotage, a way of testing whether anyone actually cared about him as a person or just wanted to use him for what he could provide, for the intensity and talent he brought to their projects. He was wrestling with demons that acting couldn't solve, and instead of dealing with them privately through therapy or some other healthy outlet, he let them spill out onto his work, poisoning relationships with people who might have been allies. By the late 80s, Rourke's reputation was becoming a serious problem. Yes, he was talented. Yes, he was bankable and could open a film based on his name alone. But he was also unpredictable, unreliable, and openly hostile toward the very industry that had made him a star, that had given him opportunities most actors would kill for. Hollywood can tolerate difficult actors if they're profitable enough, if the box office numbers justify the headaches and the drama. But there's a limit to how much disruption anyone is willing to accept, especially when there are 1,000 other talented actors who would be grateful for the same opportunities and would not cause problems. And Rourke was rapidly approaching that limit. And then in 1991, something happened that shocked everyone who had been following his career. Mickey Rourke, at the height of his fame and earning potential, walked away from acting and returned to professional boxing. He was 38 years old. Most boxers retire by that age because their bodies cannot handle the punishment anymore. He had not fought professionally in years, and he had built an entirely different career in a completely different industry. But he came back anyway, announcing his intention to fight professionally and following through despite everyone telling him it was insane. People have spent decades trying to understand why he did this. Some say it was about authenticity, that he felt acting had become too fake and commercialized, that boxing was the only real thing left in his life where outcomes mattered and you could not pretend your way through it. Some say it was self-punishment, a way of destroying the pretty face that had made him famous but also made him feel like a commodity. Some say it was simply who he was at his core, a boxer who had briefly pretended to be an actor and finally returned to his true identity because the acting world never felt like home. But whatever the reason, the decision cost him everything he had spent a decade building. He fought 8 professional fights between 1991 and 1994, mostly against opponents who were not particularly skilled, fights that were more spectacle than serious competition. He won most of them, but the victories did not matter, and nobody cared about his record. What mattered was the damage to his face: broken nose, shattered cheekbone, compressed cheekbone, split tongue, crushed cartilage. Injuries that accumulated with each fight until his face was destroyed, until the bones and tissue that made him recognizable were broken down into something that would never heal properly. And when doctors tried to repair it through reconstructive surgery, things went wrong in ways that would change his life forever. There has been endless speculation about what exactly happened with his surgeries. Some of it was necessary reconstruction from boxing injuries, procedures that any fighter would need after taking that much damage. Some of it was elective cosmetic work that did not turn out as planned, either because of surgical error or because Rourke kept requesting changes that pushed his face further from its original structure. The specifics do not matter as much as the result. Mickey Rourke's face, the face that had made him a sex symbol and carried so much of his on-screen intensity, was unrecognizable. And Hollywood, which had already been losing patience with his behavior and his reputation for being difficult, now had another reason to avoid him, a visible reminder that something had gone terribly wrong. When Rourke tried to return to acting in the mid-90s, he discovered the doors were closed. Directors who had wanted to work with him before were not interested anymore. Studios that had built films around him and considered him a bankable star moved on to other actors who were easier to work with and did not come with complicated histories. He was offered small roles in low-budget films and direct-to-video action movies, the kind of work that actors take when nothing better is available and they need to pay bills. Some of it he did for the money because the boxing years had drained his finances. Some of it he did because he still needed to work, to prove he was still relevant, even if nobody in Hollywood believed it anymore. The media was cruel about his appearance. Late-night comedians made jokes comparing his current face to old photos. Tabloids ran side-by-side comparisons asking what happened to him, treating his transformation as entertainment rather than the result of injuries and surgical complications. People who had worshipped him in the 80s, who had found him irresistible and magnetic, now stared in disbelief at what he had become, unable to reconcile the man in front of them with their memories. And Rourke, who had never been emotionally stable to begin with, retreated further into isolation and bitterness, giving fewer interviews and becoming more hostile in the ones he did give. He gave interviews where he talked about how fake Hollywood was, how the industry had betrayed him and never actually cared about his talent, how he did not need their validation anyway because he had never wanted fame in the first place. But underneath the anger, if you listened carefully, you could hear the pain of someone who had destroyed his own career and did not know how to live with that reality. Someone who needed to blame external forces because accepting personal responsibility felt impossible. Financially, the boxing years destroyed him completely. The medical bills from multiple surgeries piled up into amounts he could not pay. He was not getting the big acting paychecks anymore. He was not commanding the salaries that had made him wealthy in the 80s. He made bad investments that lost money. By the mid-2000s, Mickey Rourke was broke, living in cheap apartments, taking whatever work he could find just to survive, appearing at conventions and signing autographs for people who remembered when he was somebody. The actor who had once been compared to Marlon Brando was now doing guest spots on television shows and appearing in films nobody would ever see, working for scale just to keep going. And then in 2008, something unexpected happened. Darren Aronofsky cast him in The Wrestler, a low-budget drama about an aging wrestler trying to hold on to his identity and dignity after his body and career had both failed him. The parallels to Rourke's own life were impossible to ignore, and everyone noticed them immediately. Randy Robinson, known as the Ram, was Mickey Rourke, or a version of him, a man who had sacrificed everything for something he loved and now had nothing left except the ability to keep performing even when it hurt, even when his body was breaking down and everyone had moved on to younger talent. The performance was devastating. Rourke brought every ounce of pain and regret and desperate hope to the role, showing vulnerability he had never allowed himself before. He was not acting so much as he was bleeding on camera, showing everyone exactly what the last 15 years had cost him, what it felt like to lose everything and keep going anyway because giving up was not an option. Critics were unanimous. This was one of the great comeback performances in film history, ranking with Travolta in Pulp Fiction and Brando in The Godfather. He was nominated for an Academy Award. He won a Golden Globe and a BAFTA. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Mickey Rourke again, about redemption and second chances and how he had proven that real talent does not disappear even when everything else does. Hollywood loves a redemption story. For a brief moment, it seemed like Mickey Rourke had been forgiven, that the industry was ready to welcome him back and give him the career he should have had all along if he had not self-destructed. But that is not what happened. The comeback lasted maybe 2 years before it fell apart again, for reasons that were both predictable and somehow still disappointing. Iron Man 2 in 2010 should have been the perfect re-entry into mainstream Hollywood. Big budget, massive audience, a chance to work with Robert Downey Jr., another actor who had survived his own demons and rebuilt his career through a combination of talent and willingness to play by the rules. Even there, stories emerged about Rourke being difficult on set, about clashes with director Jon Favreau over his character's motivations, about demands and complaints that made production more complicated than it needed to be. The film was successful despite him, not because of him, and people in the industry took note. After that, the offers dried up again. He appeared in The Expendables, Sylvester Stallone's nostalgia-driven action franchise that felt like a retirement home for aging action stars, a place where careers went to survive rather than thrive. He did Passion Play, an incomprehensible drama with Megan Fox that went nowhere and was barely released. He took roles in foreign films and independent productions that could not afford better names, anything that would hire him and pay something. The momentum from the wrestler was gone, squandered through the same patterns of behavior that had destroyed his career the first time. But this is not just about bad choices or self-destruction, about an actor who could not handle success and made decisions that ruined his career. This is about trauma that never got addressed, wounds from childhood that shaped his entire approach to relationships and trust. This is about a man who learned as a child that the world was violent and dangerous, who found identity in getting hit and hitting back, who never developed the emotional tools to handle fame, intimacy, or the pressure of being what other people needed him to be. Acting required him to be vulnerable, to open himself up emotionally in ways that felt dangerous. But vulnerability felt like weakness, and weakness meant you got hurt, meant people would exploit that opening to destroy you. So he pushed people away before they could hurt him first. He sabotaged relationships before they could fail on their own. He destroyed his career before Hollywood could take it from him. The industry did not help. Hollywood rewards compliance above almost everything else. It wants actors who show up on time, say the right things in interviews, play the game without complaining even when the game is exhausting and dehumanizing. Mickey Rourke never did any of that. He challenged directors, rewrote scripts, walked off sets, publicly criticized the films he was in even when those films were making money. And while some of that was justified artistic disagreement, the industry does not care about justifications or whether you were right. It cares about whether you are worth the trouble. At a certain point, Rourke was not. What is left now is a legend and a warning. Mickey Rourke made some of the most intense, memorable performances of his generation. 9.5 Weeks, Angel Heart, The Wrestler. These are films that endure because his work in them was undeniable, because he brought something to those roles that no other actor could have provided. But his career also serves as a cautionary tale about what happens when you refuse to compromise, when you let personal demons dictate professional choices, when you walk away at exactly the wrong moment because you cannot stand what success requires of you. The tragedy is not that he failed. Lots of actors fail. The tragedy is that he came so close to greatness and couldn't hold on to it, couldn't find a way to be both himself and what Hollywood needed him to be. Maybe those two things were never compatible in the first place. Maybe Mickey Rourke was always destined to burn out rather than fade away, to give us a handful of brilliant performances and then destroy himself before he could give us more. That has to count for something. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Mickey Rourke and what his story means to you. And as always, I really do look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.